This is StoryRobot. Welcome to r/prorevenge. Our first story of today is, Ruined My Rapist's Life. I was in a relationship for maybe 2 years from 2009 to 2011 with a man I'd known online since approximately 2002. We'd met in person a few times when we happened to be in the same city but hadn't really been involved consistently in each other's offline worlds until I moved to his city to be together, share an apartment. I now recognize this as a very flawed approach to a relationship, but this was my first serious relationship. It took about 3 days to figure out he didn't actually have a job, and that his mom co-signed on his apartment, paid all of his bills and gave him money for groceries about once a week. Soon after, I learned that his mom expected me to pay her 6 full months of rent and rather hefty deposits on utilities, as he had told her I had quite a bit in savings since we had been planning this move for over a year. I suggested we put the utilities in my name and said I'd already spoken to the leasing office about how we needed to go about having me added to the lease and that I could pay them directly. She lost her beep, said I had gone behind their backs and was sneaking around trying to control everything, called me a cheap whore in front of my ex, and then said, "Are you like this because your mother molested you?" Which, to be fair, my mom did molest me. I just wasn't expecting her to know about that, or throw it in my face. I wasn't expecting any of this. Naturally, being in my early 20s, I told myself that the problem was his mother, because I was certain I truly knew him and he was a good person, and what really mattered was that we were deeply in love. The first year went by, things getting worse. He hit me, called mommy dearest about it, and she came over to let me know she raised him not to hit a lady, but I was no lady. I fell through a rotten staircase behind our apartment complex and was injured. There was a lawsuit, but it was going to take some time and I could no longer work overtime every week. I could only afford our bills and rent and basics. He started taking my painkillers for my back with no regard for my need for just half a pill maybe once a day. They'd all be gone in a week. It was an unnecessarily painful recovery. I couldn't afford his weed and cigarettes anymore, so he stayed at his mom's most of the time because then he could take money from her purse for stuff. So I was alone a lot. I was isolated. Some of his friends messaged me on Facebook telling me to dump him because he says awful things about me. Of course I didn't believe them. I decided to temporarily stay back in my hometown until the lawsuit was settled, because our lease was up anyway and it was like he had grown to dislike me but wouldn't say it. Shortly thereafter I was awarded a decent settlement and both he and his mother suddenly wanted back in my life. I was naively overjoyed that he seemed to care about me again and said he could come stay in the house I was renting from my dad in my hometown if he wanted. I had adopted a rescue dog, a smallish mutt. Things were coming together, obviously they weren't. That didn't last long. I bought our food etc., but I told him he needed to get a job if he wanted money for weed or video games or whatever. He pretty much instantly went back to hating me, would barely speak to me. I was devastated. He confronted me one night and basically told me he needed money to buy Percocet. I said no, and I don't know how else to put it. He climbed on top of me and raped me. Then he acted like that was the thing I wanted him to do in order for me to give him drug money. There, I showed you the attention you so desperately wanted, give me money. When I finally said, "You raped me," I was sobbing and he flipped out and tried to shove my dog in the microwave. Like as revenge for me calling a rape. I then forgot anything else and grabbed a broom and started jabbing him in the stomach with the handle and chased him out of my house. Our car that I paid for was in his name, so I threw him his keys and screamed at him to leave. He drove to his mom's house many hours south. My family had been so good to him that he thought he could call my dad the next day and demand that I be removed from the house so that he could collect his stuff. My dad basically told him to go beep himself. We sold or donated all of his stuff. I didn't tell anyone about him forcing himself on me etc. A year passed. I decided to get my laptop repaired. He smashed the screen during an argument and learned I had all of his passwords saved on it in Firefox. I felt sick and curious. I eventually read his chats on Facebook and Gmail chat. I went back to the time period we were together. During our relationship he had told multiple people that I was autistic, so he couldn't dump me but he could date other people. He said a lot of cruel things about me. I found a saved document, an essay he'd written for some writing group he was part of. It was about revenge sex with a girl who had rejected him 10 years earlier in high school. I remembered this situation. He'd met up with her for about an hour while she was in our city. There was no revenge sex. I know that because she invited me, too. I decided I should send her the essay. I decided I should also devastate his life, because he devastated mine. I was in a dark place. I'm not proud of what I did, but I think it's suitable to share here. I first perused Craigslist for beep pics. I needed to find a picture with no face but a body that convincingly matched his. And I did, and the best part was the beep was super flaccid and unimpressive. I decided I would change all of his passwords late at night, and then send every woman on his Facebook that picture, and then quickly claim to have been hacked, but then continue to say weird things to people. I even made a status saying my real friends would believe me that I didn't send that picture. Again, I continued to flirt with the women. I made it clear the hacking was a bull-beep excuse so that later people wouldn't believe him. I sent his high school obsession the essay, no comments. I wreaked havoc on his life for a few days before he eventually got his accounts back. I found out months later from one of his acquaintances that he lost his job. He was kicked out of the improv theater where he was training, kicked out of his writing group, and lost most of his friends over this situation. His mom got mad and blamed him for a lot of it and then stopped paying his rent, so he had to move in with her. It turns out he has lived with her ever since. He showed up at my job a couple years ago when I worked at a casino resort, but he wouldn't make eye contact with me when I said, "Oh hey, I saw your parents earlier, I wondered if they let you tag along." He has allegedly become a total shut-in. He doesn't work or interact with anyone but his parents and very rarely friends. I don't know how much of it is my fault, and while it's not something I'm proud of, it's certainly not something I'm ashamed of either. Except I do feel bad about the women on the receiving end of the beep pics. A bit. Our second story of today is, ruin my college life. I'll ruin you. I'm doing my bachelor's degree abroad. I thought that it'd be a good way to meet new people, learn how to be independent, etc. For the first month, it was all good. I made a bunch of new friends. We'll call one of them S. S was the kind of girl who had to be the center of attention no matter what, but she seemed rather alright other than that. We were part of a large social circle of around 15 people. S told me that she was going to my home country for a holiday and that if I needed anything from home, she would bring stuff back for me. I gladly obliged. I paid her half of my savings to cover any expenses she might incur for transport, and off she went. My mom had arranged to send a carton of homemade food, etc. for her to eat and bring back. Instead, S ran off with my money and dumped the food. I was out of half the money I had saved and nothing to show for it. When I called S out, she declared to the rest of our friends that we'd never had an arrangement and that I was delusional. To take things a step further, she started hanging out with everyone I was friends with and began spreading rumors about me. Every time I tried to switch social groups, S would follow my movements and alienate me from any friends I would have made. In essence, by the end of my first year of college, I had less than 3 friends left. These 3 were also fellow victims of S. Something else to mention is that S wasn't the brightest, academically. She'd plagiarized her way through exams, assignments, etc. I spent the next 3 years collecting as much evidence of this as I could. Screenshots, voice recordings, statements from the few people who were talking to me, the works. S also comes from a rather conservative family. Unfortunately for her, she had the habit of picking up guys and spending the night with them in various hotel rooms. I decided to document this as well. The final cherry on this multi-tiered cake is that the country where I'm doing my degree in has a rule that you have to be below a certain age to get a bachelor's. If you're older than the cutoff, you cannot enroll for a new undergraduate degree in certain fields. We're now in our final semester of college and S is now beyond this age. I sent my collection of evidence to everyone in the administration, every professor who had ever taught S, the dean of academics, and her parents. S was formally rusticated yesterday and her parents have disowned her. Because of her age, she can't even get a degree in her field of interest anymore unless she leaves the country, which is now impossible for her as her parents want nothing to do with her. I waited for 3 long years and it was worth every second. Thank you for watching. Error. Problem detected. Not enough subscribers. Please subscribe, like and comment.